Choosing a class in World of Kings can be a pretty daunting task because of the variety of awakened classes and versatility within those awakening skill trees. If you've been wondering about which class you should choose, look no further. In this video, I'm going to be doing a brief flyover of each class, which will hopefully provide some insight as to which class will be the best option for you as an individual player. I know that many of you are here to find out what the most broken classes are at the current point in the game, and I will have a section at the end of the video where I will tell you what classes I believe are the absolute best at what they do. Before we get started, let me submit to you that there is no master class. A successful guild is what is required to progress in this game, and no guild can survive or succeed in certain raid or PvP encounters without the buffs, heals, or defensive cooldowns that many of these classes provide. With that being said, all of these classes are viable, and all of them excel in their given role. This video will simply help you figure out which role is best and most fun for you. I will go through each class in sequence, briefly describing their uses, strengths, and weaknesses, and then at the end of the video, I will provide some analysis to hopefully help you finally come to a decision as to which class you should choose. Timestamps will be in the description. Please like the video if you enjoy. The Warrior was created just to be specifically a PvE just powerhouse tank. Looking at the Awakening class preview here, we have the Vanguard, the Guardian, and the Gladiator. Now, with this class specifically, it's more of a PvE styled class. It doesn't really excel in PvP in many regards, but this tank again was just specifically built to survive. The Vanguard and the Guardian specifically are the two superior survival classes here. In PvE, they basically, like I said, just never die in boss fights. And then in mass PvP scenarios, they're very tanky, but they don't do nearly any damage at all. They have interrupts and, raid cooldowns, defensive cooldowns, self-heals, and those kinds of things are helpful, but there are other classes that just do it better in terms of PvP. For PvE, you really can't get any better than this, though, for the Vanguard and, again, the Guardian. The Gladiator just sort of tries to act like a bruiser slash tank, but it really doesn't do well in either of those regards, and so I would recommend staying away from the Gladiator in total. The Fighter was created to be a massive, massive damage dealer, and that is exactly what it does. Under the Fighter subclass tree, we have the Berserker, which is a DPS class, the Weapon Master, which is also a DPS class, and then finally the Archon, which is a healer. The Berserker and the Weapon Master both are relatively similar in that they deal high amounts of damage, but I would say by and large the highest DPS under this skill tree, and actually probably in the entire game, and that is specifically because of this ability, Coup de Grace. What Coup de Grace does is, it is what is called an execute ability, and that is when you're facing a target that has reached below a threshold of 20% HP, you begin to do massive, just crazy amounts of damage, and that will oftentimes, and more likely than not, net you the top spots on the damage charts. And just for reference, the Berserker also has Destructive, which is also an execute, but in terms of long-term damage, the Weapon Master is superior. Now, the Archon is a healer, and oh my gosh, this is just an incredible healing class, and I would say, again, arguably the best healer in the entire game in terms of raid, DPS, and overall party support, and that is because he heals through his damaging attack abilities, and so through his attacks, through his damage dealing, he heals his party, he gives them certain buffs and bonuses, and he has this ability here, Banner of Valor, that if you just get your party to stack underneath that Banner of Valor, all of your attacks would have their damage increased by 15%, among other things, and you would just get continuous healing. And so if you were in a large 25-person raid and you synchronize that with another healer's ability, which we'll discuss shortly, the Bard under the Archer class, you have basically an unstoppable healing force as long as the people in the raid are conscious enough to stay within an area of effect radius of the Archon. Highly recommend this class. Fantastic, fantastic healer and damage dealer. The Rogue is at a bit of a point of controversy right now just because of how broken it is. Everybody's complaining, oh, I keep getting one-shot by these rogues, and that is exactly what they are good at. Looking at the Awakened class preview, we have the Blade Master, the Spellblade, and the Shadow, all of which are DPS classes. Now, the Blade Master is more of a damage over time character. He has higher sustained damage. He does have burst damage, but this character really shines in PvE scenarios. Alternatively, we have the Spellblade, which is arguably the highest burst damage character in the entire game for PvP, and actually PvE as well. His sustain is not as good as the Blade Master, but the Spellblade is the class that is probably the most predominant threat in the PvP arena right now, just because they have an ability that does not respect the global cooldown, and what that means is that they can cast the same ability basically 3 times within a second and just kill someone before they even realize that you're there. And so most of the competitive PvP players are playing the Spellblade class, and that is with good reason. The Shadow Dancer class is actually just inferior in both ways. Like I said, the Blade Master is good in PvE, the Spellblade is good in PvP, and the Shadow Dancer is just not as good as either of those things. And so I would recommend staying away from the Shadow Dancer. It's a decent class, but when you have something that is as broken as the Spellblade or the Blade Master, you would want to opt into one of these two options 10 times out of 10. Now, the Wizard also finds itself kind of in the center of a bit of a controversy within the game as well, just like the Rogue, and also with good reason. Let's take a look at the Awakened classes. So the Wizard has the Flame Singer, the Frost Whisper, and the Fire Frost subclasses. Now, everybody and their mother and their dog is going Frost Whisper because their PvP abilities are out of this world. If you do not focus kill a Frost Whisper, you will be walking basically in molasses the entire match. Not only that, he has an ability called Ice Spike, which if it crits, I've actually one-shot not one but 2 people at the same time before, and I'm talking 427,000 crits, and that is in the very early stages of the game without many modifiers in the way of crit damage increase. And so this class is incredibly potent, just specifically because of its crowd control and slowing ability. It is far superior than the Flame Singer and the Fire Frost Wizard, and that is just because it, at this point in the game, can do everything for you. You can play the Flame Singer, it's pretty good at single target DPS as well as the Fire Frost Wizard, but when you have something as good as a Frost Whisper, there really is not a reason to want to play any of the other classes, at least while you're a Wizard. The Mage is a bit of an interesting class here. While being distinct from the Wizard in several ways, it has access to a subclass called the Crystal Shaper and the Arcane Scholar. Now, these two classes are actually pretty good in terms of damage. They have very high damage output. They have crowd control abilities such as Polymorph and other abilities like Roots and Slows. They really excel in PvE damage. Now, the only problem that I would say with these two characters would be the fact that Iron Will exists, the military ability that allows you to break any crowd control for free with a 2-minute cooldown. That basically stops these classes in their tracks. If Iron Will was not in the game and these classes had access to Polymorph and they could not be broken, they could polymorph somebody and just combo them to death immediately. But because Iron Will exists, they can just break the crowd control, and I'm speaking in PvP terms now. They can break the crowd control, jump on the Arcane Scholar or the Crystal Shaper, and basically just make them have a very bad day very quickly. On the other hand, the Battle Mage is a savage tank. Look at the defense and the crowd control on that thing. It's actually a pretty broken class, and a lot of people are saying that man, it's just a fantastic tank in every single regard, in PvP and PvE. This tank can do everything that all of the other regular physical damage dealing tanks can do, and this class has basically all of its abilities are CC abilities, crowd control abilities. They have the ability to shut people down, to stop them from moving, and all the while they're able to tank just massive amounts and parry massive amounts of damage. This is a very fun alternative for somebody who doesn't want to stick with the traditional melee class while they're tanking, but if they want to kind of explore and just have a little bit of fun with the sword and shield and cast magic, the Battle Mage, I highly recommend it. Moving on to the Dark Sage, the Warlock style class here. It's a bit of an interesting class, as you'll see here in just a moment. Looking at the Awakened subclasses here, we have the Chaos Warlock, the Necromancer, and finally the Vampire. The Chaos Warlock is essentially a PvE combo dependent class that just runs train in raids. It is a very, very high damage output. It is very good at damage over time spells, and this class really just relies on the rotation to do massive amounts of damage. I will say, however, in PvP, especially small scale PvP, this class really kind of struggles because it doesn't have much in the way of survivability. If a rogue jumps on him, he's basically going to die immediately. The Necromancer, on the other hand, is a pretty good class. It has a few more things going for it in terms of PvP. It has this ability here, Banshee's Wail, which is a 6-second fear. And then he has an awakening ability called Lichborn, which increases his damage output and decreases his damage taken, and then resets the Banshee's Wail ability, enabling him to fear again for 6 seconds. Additionally, he has Fade into the Mist, which makes him invincible and heals up to 6 allies. This class is actually kind of fun in PvP. The thing I love about this game is there's a very high skill cap, and so if you're a good player, you can do some work in PvP with a Necromancer. It's very effective in PvE as well, but mostly this class is going to shine in large scale, massive PvP. In small scale PvP, you're going to have to be very careful about survivability and when to use your fears to survive an onslaught from a rogue at the initial point of the game. Finally, the Vampire is the healing variant of the Dark Sage, and this is actually a very, very good healer. Most of his heals are what are called heal over time spells, where if the healer is kind of taking notice of the people in the party, he can cast abilities on them and they'll recover HP over time. This class is very, very versatile in that it does its healing through damaging abilities. What that means is it translates very well into, let's say, a high-level Overlord dungeon where maybe you're struggling to meet a DPS check and you need your party to do enough damage to kill the boss before it enrages. This is going to be a fantastic asset to that group because he'll be dealing a lot more damage than a traditional healer would be doing. All the while, your party would remain topped off in terms of HP. And so this is a very, very good class for PvE. He is also pretty decent in PvP as well, more so large-scale PvP where people wouldn't focus him. But generally speaking, this entire class tree here under the Dark Sage kind of suffers in small-scale PvP because of their lack of escape options versus classes that would want to jump on them. Next up, the Cleric. You're probably going to be surprised by this. Now, the Cleric has the Exarch, the Saint, and the Lightbringer subclasses. I'm just going to tell you straight up. The Exarch and the Saint are nothing compared to the Lightbringer. In the same way that the Vampire Warlock heals via damaging abilities, the Lightbringer also heals via damaging abilities. However, if you spec full on into DPS for your Lightbringer, you will have a class that is a savage in PvP, specifically small scale PvP, and they do very well in large scale PvP as well. But this class is a hard counter to the most prolific threat in small scale PvP right now, and that would be, of course, the Rogue. He has Shield of Devotion, which essentially nullifies the Rogue's entire kit and prevents them from one-shotting him. I actually had a buddy tell me that this class was one of the 2 people to only reach the Diamond rank in 3v3 and 5v5, and that is because it just is able to put out so much damage while keeping himself healed up. The Lightbringer is a fantastic asset to any raid team or any type of composition, and honestly, there is no reason to go Saint or Exarch over the Lightbringer just because of how good he is and all of the abilities that he has. The Paladin has 3 different subclasses: the Templar, the Inquisitor, and the Dragon Rider. Starting on the bottom with the Templar is more of a support-focused tank, which provides buffs and damage mitigation to your party members. He also has abilities like the Angelic Shield, which will protect you from rogue onslaught in PvP and mass incoming damage from raids. And this class is just a very, very good tank in both PvP and PvE, specifically because, again, he provides all of those damage cooldowns for the raid. He's very support oriented. The Inquisitor is, again, I'm just going to be honest with you, it's not a good class. This Inquisitor sort of teeters on the edge of trying to be like a melee CC damage mage, and it just falls into a category that just makes it a lackluster choice on the whole. There are other classes that do this role much better, specifically the Battle Mage. And alternatively, the Dragon Rider, basically the complete opposite of the Templar, is not support focused, but he is only about himself. He can tank, but he can also deal massive amounts of damage. And so this Dragon Rider is actually a very good class, again, for completing dungeons like high-level overlords where you need to have mass amounts of damage. So traditionally, the tank will not do a lot of damage, but this person can tank and deal lots of damage, which is very, very useful, again, for high-level content that you need to run through quickly. And what's not to like about this? You can basically conjure a golden dragon beneath you and just ride it off into the sunset. And if that's not good enough for you, you can turn into a true dragon and just spit flames from your mouth, raining it down upon your enemies. Also, very highly recommend this class as well. And finally, the Archer, the traditional ranged class in many MMORPGs. And there's actually a pretty interesting take on this class, as you will see in just a moment. The Archer has the subclasses the Demon Hunter, the Marksman, which are both DPS, and then the Bard, which is a healer. Now, the Demon Hunter has very, very high single target DPS, but is more PvE focused. If he has peel in PvP situations, and what I mean by that is if there are people who are conscious enough to pull enemies off of him in PvP scenarios, the Demon Hunter can put in some work. But the Marksman is going to be superior in terms of single target PvP, as he has things like Mark and Snipe, where he can take enemies down quickly, along with other CC abilities where he can disengage and protect himself and escape. I would say, again, the Demon Hunter is more PvE focused. The Marksman is more PvP focused, although it does excel in PvE. And finally, the Bard, which is probably my second favorite healer in the entire game, right below the Archon, and probably just slightly above the Lightbringer. The Bard is fantastic because the Bard uses predominantly area of effect heals, such as the Song of Heroes. And if you look here, if your party members are standing within this Song of Heroes, not only do they get healed a massive amount, but their critical damage increases by 50%. And so if you have, let's say, an Archon and a Bard standing together and they're casting their AoE healing abilities, and your raid is conscious enough to stand within the threshold of those AoE abilities, you're going to be doing 50% increased damage. You'll have increased base damage from the Archon, and you'll have increased haste. It is just a fantastic way to go about completing raids and kind of padding damage numbers to make sure that you meet the damage thresholds that the raid is demanding. Okay, I know that was a lot of information, but my advice to you before you kind of soak all that up is just ask yourself, do I want to play a damage class? Do I want to play a healing class, or do I want to play a tanking class? There are going to be inherent benefits for each of these classes. So for example, if you're a tank or a healer, your queues for dungeons are generally speaking going to be instantaneous. And if you're a DPS, you'll probably be waiting a long period of time before you can get your daily dungeons done, unless of course you queue up with your friends. I would say choose a class that you enjoy playing and stick with that. And that is of course what all of this is about anyway, is enjoying the game. Now for the section on what I think are the best classes for each given role. If tanking is what you're interested in, you're going to want to select either firstly the Warrior as the Vanguard or the Guardian for PvE content. Secondly, for a magic-based tank, you want to select the Battle Mage under the Mage tree for both PvP and PvE content. Thirdly, the Paladin. You're going to want to go Templar for more of a support-based subclass, and you're going to want to go Dragon Rider if you need to put out a little bit more damage to clear content quicker. Secondly, if DPS is what you're interested in, I would recommend selecting the Fighter and then speccing into the Weapon Master subclass. Secondly, I would suggest going into the Rogue subclass and either choosing the Blade Master for PvE content or the Spellblade for just a broken PvP class. Thirdly, as a ranged DPS caster, I would suggest going Wizard and Frost Whisperer for both PvP and PvE. And finally, for the highest recommendation for DPS, I would suggest going Archer and either Demon Hunter for PvE content or Marksman for PvP content. Lastly, if healing is what you're interested in, I would suggest going Fighter and speccing into the Archon subtree. This is again a fantastic healer and mostly AoE based. Secondly, I would suggest going Cleric and speccing into the Lightbringer subclass if you're wanting to be a healer and be very effective in both PvP and PvE. And the last healer that I would highly recommend would be under the Archer subclass tree, the Bard, which again has massive AoE heals and also buffing capabilities. Again, all of these other classes that I maybe didn't recommend are very good classes, but the classes that I specifically made mention of are just the ones that do it better. You can be effective and efficient as any of these classes, and for example, if you're looking at a mage, and maybe I didn't highly recommend either the Crystal Shaper or the Arcane Scholar, you will still have instances where people are so good with these classes that they can go into PvP and just destroy people who pick the top tier Frost Whisper. So don't feel like just because I didn't recommend it, that your class is not good or that you need to change. I hope this video was helpful. If you thought it was helpful, please like it and share it with your friends. Also, consider subscribing if you have not subscribed to the channel yet. I will be releasing, again, more guides and content to help aid you in your understanding of this brand new game, World of Kings. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your day.